I never expected the hardest phone call of my life to come on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I was in my kitchen in Atlanta. Jordan was at the stove. Everything was warm and normal. And then my phone buzzed on the counter. My mom, Patricia. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 years. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. She said, "Avery, it's Aubrey. She's in the hospital. Her kidneys are failing, and she's asking for you." I told my mom I'd think about it. Hung up, and Jordan came and stood near me and said, "Talk to me." To explain why that phone call was so complicated, I'd have to go all the way back to San Antonio, Texas, and a twin sister who spent years teaching me that sharing someone's blood doesn't mean they'll ever truly be in your corner. Aubrey and I were born 3 minutes apart on a Tuesday morning in March. She came first. She spent the next 19 years acting like that meant something. We were identical. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same small gap between our front teeth, but we were never close. And the reason had everything to do with what was allowed in our house. My mom Patricia had a blind spot for Aubrey that was enormous. My dad Robert worked long hours and trusted my mom's version of everything, which meant he trusted Aubrey's version, because those two were almost always the same. When we were 8 years old, I had a purple cassette player I saved 3 months of birthday money for. One afternoon Aubrey walked into my room, picked it up, looked me in the eye, and let it fall. I watched her do it deliberately. When I told my mom, Aubrey said it slipped. My mom said, "Accidents happen, Avery. Be more careful where you leave your things." 8 years old, and I already understood the rules of that house. My feelings were not the priority, and Aubrey knew it. The difference between us was simple. I was hurt by it. She was empowered by it. And that gap only widened as we got older. After high school, we both stayed in San Antonio. I worked 2 jobs saving for design school. We were 19 living as adults under the same roof. And at 19, Aubrey was sharper than ever, more deliberate, more patient. She knew exactly what she was doing. That summer I met Ryan at a friend's backyard gathering. He was sitting away from the noise, just watching everything quietly. He asked about my sketchbook, looked through it carefully, and said, "Avery, this is actually really good. Have you thought about studying design professionally? When you have spent years having your work quietly dismissed, someone actually seeing it does something to you that is hard to explain. Like something tight loosening just slightly." We started dating that summer. He was consistently kind. The quiet, steady kind you only appreciate after spending time around people who weren't. I was genuinely happy. And I think that was exactly what set things in motion. Because Aubrey noticed. She always noticed. I brought Ryan to the house 2 months in, and when Aubrey looked up from the kitchen table and saw him, something shifted in her face, small and fast. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. Ryan told me later about small conversations Aubrey found ways to have with him when I wasn't around. Nothing obvious, just carefully placed seeds. Never impulsive, always patient, always 3 steps ahead. 6 months in, Ryan became distant, slower responses, small excuses. When I asked if everything was okay, he said, "Of course, I love you." And I believed him. It was Simone who found out. She came over one Saturday morning and showed me a photo on her phone. Ryan and Aubrey at the park 3 blocks from our house, together, in a way that needed no explanation. I knocked on Aubrey's door. She opened it, saw my face, and she didn't look ashamed. She looked prepared. She said Ryan came to her first. She said, "These things just happen sometimes. These things just happen." Same energy as accidents happen, Avery. When we were 8 years old, nothing was ever her fault. I told my parents everything. My mom said these situations are complicated. She said we can't just take sides. My dad looked at the wall. And from upstairs I could hear Aubrey's music playing like nothing happened. 2 months later, Aubrey found out I was bisexual. I think she went through my phone. And instead of coming to me, she went straight to my parents, not out of concern. She did it because my parents were starting to look at her differently after the Ryan situation. She needed a redirect. She handed them something she knew would detonate, and stepped back and watched it go off. I came home that Friday evening to my mom at the kitchen table, my dad near the refrigerator, and Aubrey on the couch, watching. By the end of that night my parents told me to leave. That night, with what I could carry, 19 years old. Standing on the front porch with a backpack and nowhere to go, I called Simone. She said, "Stay right there. I'm coming right now." Diane opened the door before we made it up the driveway. Didn't ask questions, just said, "Come inside, baby. You're staying as long as you need." And I walked into that small warm house, and exhaled for the first time in months. 6 months later I got into a design school in Atlanta. I was 20 years old. Simone screamed so loud Diane's cat fell off the counter, and Diane grabbed both of us and said, "I knew it. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it." That small kitchen, that wobbly table, no parents, no Aubrey, just the people who actually showed up. One of the best moments of my life. I moved to Atlanta, studied hard, worked part-time, met Jordan at 21, architecture student. Quietly confident in a way that had nothing to do with performance. We were friends first. By 23, we were together. Steady and honest and good. The kind of good that actually holds. Simone moved to Atlanta 2 years later. Sunday dinners became our weekly ritual. Diane visited twice a year. By 26, I was doing work that excited me every morning. My life was full, built from scratch, with people who chose to be there. Jordan proposed when I was 28. She slid a ring across the kitchen table and said, "I don't want to do any of this without you." I said yes, cried a little. She laughed. We got married that fall. Small ceremony. Every person in that room had earned their place there. Simone was my maid of honor. Diane cried from the opening song all the way through the vows. I stood at that altar and thought, this is what family actually looks like. Not the one you're born into, the one you build. 8 months after the wedding my mom called. I was 29. Aubrey was in the hospital. Kidney failure, now serious. And she was asking for me. I thought about it for 2 days. Not from guilt, just honestly. And I decided to go. Not for Aubrey, for myself. To walk into that room as the woman I had become, and make my decision from honesty. I drove to Houston alone. 4 hours. Gas station coffee. Radio on low. My parents were in the waiting area, both older than I expected. My mom moved toward me, with her arms open, and I stopped. I just didn't move toward her. Her arms came down slowly. My dad cleared his throat and said, "Avery, thanks for coming." Casual, like 4 years hadn't passed. I asked which room was Aubrey's, and walked toward it. She was thinner than I remembered. Connected to monitors beeping steadily in the gray quiet room. Pale light through the half-open blinds. Very still. She looked at me, and I looked at her. Same face. Except she looked exhausted in a way that went past tired. And I didn't. We both knew it. She said my name. Soft. Genuinely soft. She said she was glad I came, that she didn't think I would. I sat down and let her talk. She said having Ryan hadn't made her happy, because she never actually wanted him. She wanted to take him, because taking things from me was always how she felt powerful in a family where she was already handed everything. She said that out loud. And I believed her, because it explained everything, all the way back to the cassette player, all the way back to being 8 years old. She talked about the outing. She said she panicked. She could feel my parents shifting and she needed a redirect. So she used me as a shield. At 19 years old, she used me as a shield. Then she looked at me and said, "Avery, I need to ask you something, and you have every right to say no." She asked if I would consider being tested as a kidney donor. The room went quiet, just the monitors beeping, my own breathing. I thought about being 19 on that front porch, backpack on one shoulder, nowhere to go. I thought about Diane's kitchen, the wobbly table, every sketchbook filled alone. Every morning I got up and kept building from nothing. I thought about Simone, about Jordan, about Diane, about everything I made with people who chose to show up. And then I looked at Aubrey and spoke quietly, calmly, without cruelty. Because I had something more powerful than cruelty. I had clarity. I said, Aubrey, I hear you, and I believe you mean what you're saying. But I need you to hear me. Maybe for the first time in our lives. A kidney is not a gesture. It's a surgery, a recovery, a real risk someone takes with their own body. And the people I would do that for are the people who showed up for me. The ones who were there when it cost them something, not just when they needed something back. You didn't show up for me, Aubrey. You took my boyfriend deliberately. You handed my parents the one private thing I was still protecting, knowing exactly what they would do. You sat on that couch and watched them tell me to leave. And you said nothing. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not going to donate a kidney. Not because I want you to suffer, but because this is my decision, from a place of honesty. And honestly, I can't give you this. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just closed her eyes and nodded once. Slowly, I stood up, picked up my bag, and said, I genuinely hope you find a match, Aubrey. I mean that. And I walked out. My parents were still in the waiting area. My mom's face asked the question. I said, I'm not a match. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was all I was prepared to give her. And I kept walking through the lobby, through the automatic doors, out into the Houston afternoon, warm air, big blue Texas sky. I stood on that sidewalk, and I breathed. I called Jordan from the parking lot. She said, how are you doing? I said, I'm okay. I'm actually really okay. She said, come home. I said, I'm on my way. Simone called 4 months later. Aubrey had passed. She never found a compatible donor. I was on the balcony when the call came. Evening. String lights on above me. Jordan came and sat beside me after I hung up. She didn't say anything, just put her hand over mine. And we sat there together in the quiet. I let myself grieve, not for who Aubrey was, or what she did, but for who she could have been. For the twin sister I deserved and never had. Grief doesn't always mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it just means you're honest enough to feel the weight of something that was never fixable. The calls came from relatives telling me I was selfish. I listened once, deleted, blocked, not from anger, from self-preservation. Because I was finished letting other people's definitions of me live inside my head. My parents called 4 times. I didn't answer. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I'm making that decision from clarity, not guilt, on my own timeline. If you grew up in a house where you were never quite chosen, if you spent years making yourself smaller just to keep the peace, hear this. You are allowed to build your own family. You are allowed to say no, even to blood, because nobody gets to spend years taking from you, and then show up when they need something, and call that family. Family is behavior. Family is who shows up when it costs them something. Family is who stays. Simone, Jordan, Diane, they are my family. The real kind, the chosen kind. And I would give any one of them a kidney without a single second of hesitation. Because that is what you do for the people who actually show up. My name is Avery. I was born a twin on a Tuesday morning in March. I spent 19 years in a house that never fully felt like mine. And I spent the next 11 years building something that does. I am 30 years old, standing in a warm apartment in Atlanta, with a partner who loves me, a best friend who has been there through everything, and a life that is completely and entirely mine. I am at peace. Real peace. The kind nobody can take from you, because you built it yourself.